Welcome, welcome everyone. My name is Inessa Pawson. I'm a contributor experience lead for NumPy. I'm a Caucasian blonde woman in my 40s wearing a blue turtleneck and a blue headset. If you're just joining us, please introduce yourself in the chat. I'd like to remind you that all attendees of NumPy community events must adhere to the NumPy Code of Conduct. The NumPy Steering Council has made a strong commitment to creating an open, inclusive, and positive community. If you haven't done it already, please read the NumPy Code of Conduct for guidance on how to interact with others in a way that makes the community thrive. All attendees of our events must adhere to it. I wish for you all to have a positive experience at our events. If you see violations, take a screenshot, intervene in a respectful manner, and report it to the COC committee via email. For more information, visit numpy.org/code-of-conduct, and I'll post all this information in the chat as well. Now we'll move on to the main part of our event. Mars Lee, today's presenter, has been a part of quite a few initiatives within the NumPy project over the years. Today, she will share with us about her work making NumPy more accessible. Given the size of our user base and the place in the dependency chain, this is a very important topic that unfortunately doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. With this event, we are trying to bring more awareness to the community and hopefully get more accessibility advocates on the NumPy team. Mars, please take it away.
Thank you, Inessa, for that introduction. I will be sharing some slides here, and then I'll be starting off. Okay, so I have the slides, and I think everyone can see it now. Cool. So hi, everyone. I'm the guest speaker for today, Mars Lee. Thank you, Inessa, for kicking things off. I am an Asian woman with hexagonal glasses, and I'm wearing quite a chill Hawaiian t-shirt because I am wishing for sunny weather that is not here yet. So today's topic is making NumPy accessible with community workshops, how we can involve more people with disabilities in data science. So a quick introduction of your speaker. I am Mars Lee. I am a designer and a developer. I work at Quansight, and I contribute to the NumPy docs and the website. So in this Newcomers Hour, I'll be talking about the community workshops that I have hosted with the NumPy community. And so I have a few diagrams explaining this. So I have done these workshops in NumPy along with other scientific community projects. But for me, it really started with NumPy. And earlier this year, I gave a conference talk about these workshops. And the original talk was targeted and tailored for the conference attendees. But I am here in the Newcomers Hour because I want to tie this back into NumPy where it started. So in this Newcomers Hour, I will be presenting a conference talk about the community workshops. I also wanted to explain a bit more about the talk's original context. So the talk was originally happened early this year at FOSDEM, the Free and Open Source Design Software Developers European meeting, and it is usually held up in person in Europe, but this year was held remotely. So in FOSDEM, this talk was given specifically in the open source design track. So when it comes to like conferences, we usually think about developers, but there's also a designers track, which shows you that there are a lot of different contributions that people can make. And as a newcomer, if you're a newcomer to NumPy, welcome. There's a lot of different things that you could contribute to. So coming back to our topic at hand, the million-dollar question, how can we involve more people with disabilities in NumPy and data science? But before we can answer the how, we need to ask the why. Why aren't there more people with disabilities in NumPy? Well, that's because they can't access it. And I'll be giving more concrete examples of what access and accessibility means later on. But non-disabled people need to take the first step by making our software, website, and documentation accessible. So how can NumPy become more accessible? Come to our community workshops. I'll be going into more detail on that a bit. But the more people we have, the more that we can accomplish together. We also need more contributors in different accessibility efforts. And these workshops I'm talking about is just focused on alt text, which is just one type of accessibility. But there's a lot more that could be done, including like keyboard or cognitive accessibility. And as we have more different contributors, the more we can cover. Lastly, for NumPy to become more accessible, it will take time. And we can look at this goal as a long-term community roadmap. We want to create a cultural change where more people with disabilities feel welcomed and that they can be in NumPy, that they can take advantage of all these cool tools and be part of all this like scientific discovery. So right now, I think we're really at the very beginning, and it will take time for us to really reach the goal, but I'm sure that we can do it. And hey, if you're a newcomer, you could make a non-code contribution. Non-code contributions are also incredibly important and is something that we are trying to make a more effort into. So if you're interested in with accessibility workshops or what we could do in terms of design or user experience, you could contact me in the NumPy Slack or at my email provided here. So next up, I'll be sharing the talk. So it is actually a pre-recorded video because the conference was remote and that was the format, not live. But it also means that it has captions, so that it's accessible, easy to read. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in chat. In the conference, it was a lot of fun to interact people in the chat. So you will be seeing me around there. And you can also ask questions live afterwards. Both the questions in the chat and live will be answered in the Q&A section. So now I will be handing this off to Anessa to help share the video.
(2022) Open Source Design Room. Hello everyone. Welcome to my talk, Why Designers Are the Mediators of Accessibility. Thank you for coming to my little corner here of Awesome 2022 Open Source Design Room. First, an introduction of your speaker, Mars Lee. Oh, this picture is a little outdated. Let me just update it here and let's see. There we go. Much better. So I am a front-end developer and designer. I work at Quansight, and I contribute to NumPy. For the visually impaired folks back at home, I'm an Asian woman with octagonal glasses and in bright primary colors. As you know, this talk is only 20 minutes long, and there is a lot to cover, so we'll be going quick. These slides and resources will be posted around. You won't be seeing me anymore, but if you want to see more of this mugshot over here, join me in the Q&A afterwards. All right, let's get started.
First, what and why accessibility? Accessibility is about making the world accessible to the full range of human experience, which includes disabilities. For example, to access school, a wheelchair user uses a ramp. To read books, a blind person uses Braille. Accessibility benefits everyone. Curb cuts were originally made for wheelchair users, but they also help people with strollers, luggage bags, or doing sick skateboard tricks. Even translating is accessibility. Translating books allows more people to access new worlds in their imagination. Accessible technology is very similar. For example, to access online school, a visually impaired person could use a screen reader. To access news, you could read, yes, but you could also access news as data visualization. Data visualization is a form of accessibility too. Accessibility is important because it lets us live creative, independent, and fulfilling lives. For example, you can access a museum and be inspired, but also put your own spin on it to make it uniquely yours. Helen Keller could access books by Braille and then create her own book. With access to the world, people with disabilities can shape it as well. The digital world and data is the future, and people with disabilities are also in that future. Some may ask, why should open source in particular be more accessible? Firstly, disabled developers already do exist. Secondly, to not be accessible would be against the very ethos of open source. Open source prides itself for being free, not behind a high price tag. It is available to all. That's radical. That is so cool. And that ethos creates a beautiful culture of giving back and contributing. But available does not necessarily mean accessible. If we were to make open source more accessible, then people with disabilities can join in. Everyone can contribute back. We are going to make open source accessible, and if you agree, then get on my magic carpet and let's go! But wait, where do we start? Are there guidelines? Which ones? Oh no, we're stuck. What are the barriers? First barrier is that, well, where do you even start? People with disabilities are not the problem. We would like to have everyone to be able to access open source software. But just there are different people, there are different disabilities and different solutions. A person with an auditory impairment or deaf has different options if they want to access a news report. There may be a sign language interpreter, or the video has closed captions, or maybe they would prefer to read the transcript. All are possible. Open source is decentralized. Alas, much like a Greek tragedy, its greatest strengths are also its weakness. Accessible technology is about creating a cohesive alternative experience like running a parallel track. It's a little different, but ultimately leads to the same place. However, different contributors contribute to different things. That can make for patchy coverage, like a running track with holes. Another barrier is current open source developer needs and culture. I use the word current because it can change. Developers have release cycles and workflows. This is good. It brings the decentralized things together. But it can also make it hard to introduce a new project such as accessibility. Primary platforms are not where the disabled community gathers. GitHub, for the most part, is for developers. And there are disabled developers. But open source is built upon, remixed, and released to millions of users. Asking an ordinary disabled user to sign up for GitHub to make an issue about a product they can't even fully use, that's a lot. And lastly, there is still a perception that accessibility is non-essential, even though accessibility benefits everyone. It's kind of like how design is often considered an afterthought. All these barriers and walls, they're not malicious or intentional, but they are there. There's tension in the air. Some people don't feel heard. Some people don't understand what's the problem. I wonder who could help. Oh, I know. Designers! Designers breaking down barriers like Kool-Aid Man, the beloved drink mascot. Here he gets a paintbrush, because he's a designer now. And a little beret. Snazzy. Why designers? Why us? Why us? Well, design is already accessibility. Redesigning a news site to be more readable? That's accessibility, especially cognitively. Increasing the contrast because it's hard to read? Bam! You're helping people with vision loss. Bad design can harm people. Good design helps. Us designers, we already have the skills to be the mediators of accessibility. And these skills are from our visual arts training. The ability to zoom out and see the big picture. Finding connections between disparate objects, seeing it from another angle, try another composition. To create a pleasant user flow. To have someone's eyes follow your connections, jumping from point to point, zooming in and out just as you did, where the viewer is fully immersed in your art. Another reason why designers are the mediators, We are simultaneously both an insider and an outsider. We are used to advocating that design is important. While we may feel like outsiders, we're not the only ones. In comparison, we're insiders. We have insider knowledge. These may be the millions of users who use open source every day, but not even realize it. The ones who are not on GitHub, and that the inaccessible parts still block them from using a product, enjoying their lives, or independence. We can mediate in the middle of this Venn diagram and expand the circle, and with that first step, open the door to many more so that others can feel comfortable too. Open source prides itself on self-governance and self-advocacy. Come here and tell us what's wrong so we can fix it at this meeting happening at 4 p.m. Sounds reasonable. But all the organizers were based in New York, and this time is inconvenient for community members in other time zones, such as in Brussels, or just inaccessible for others, such as in New Delhi. Similar situations happen all the time for disabled developers, but instead of time zones, it could be accessing images and documentation. The phrase, read the docs, everything's in there, assumes that everyone can access these things. And if they can't, it can be hard to even ask for change, such as creating a GitHub issue, and they may leave the space altogether. It's easy to end up thinking, there's no problem, we didn't hear anything. But again, it's not intentionally malicious, but it is easy to assume. Our story and impact, from theory to action, this is a case study. Our story begins like many others. Current open source culture focuses on building some very good things. But as you can see, no one was talking much about accessibility. It wasn't a common topic. So someone just asked a question, and that person is Isabella. She's my workshop co-host. But back to the story. It started off small, and it was a little scary too. What if nobody thought it was any worth? But the conversation grew and grew, and that's how I found out about it and joined her. It started with a designer using her position, an insider asking the outsider question. I joined her, but what now? Where do we start? As mentioned earlier, there are many different disabilities and solutions as well. We kept learning more and more. It got a little overwhelming. We asked ourselves, could we really help anyone? It's sort of like trying to find Waldo in a Where's Waldo picture. Is he here? Is he here? Is he there? You get so caught up in that one detail and another one that you're zoomed all the way in. But wait, zoom back out. Yes, there is a lot, but you don't need to solve everything at once. And yes, Waldo is actually here, right there, right there. We had to zoom out and prioritize, understand what our disabled users need most. We started with what was already there. Then we moved out further into outreach. GitHub isn't really the default platform for the disabled community or designers. Some get past this barrier, some don't. Twitter is one place with a sizable disabled community. We learned a lot too. There are so many resources such as Ally, the Diagram Center, and Chartability. In fact, we are writing a resource for cross-project collaboration called the Scientific Python Ecosystem Coordination, a forum for this specific niche of ours. Check any of these out. We learned, now we apply. One example was in the NumPy documentation. We created alt text by following the resources cited earlier. Alt text is what screen readers read out, so that people with visual disabilities can also experience the image. We were making progress, but in our own projects individually. Is there a way to spread this at a larger scale? We wanted to spread it, but the barrier was decentralization and culture. But we were approaching it the wrong way. We were not taking advantage of these barriers to turn them into strengths. That was our big light bulb moment. Rather than work against open source and feel left out, we work with it and create our own space. We created a workshop that introduces accessibility and fits it into existing developer workflows and platforms. we can use the same tools to create something different, and the familiarity makes it an easier introduction. At last, our accessibility workshop, the alt text workshop. We crowdsourced adding alt text to images by hosting short 1-hour sprints where people make contributions using the GitHub suggestion feature. Let's break it down. The GitHub suggestion feature is traditionally used in code reviews for small changes or discussion, but we saw the potential for more. There was a page in the NumPy documentation lacking alt text. So we created a fork where people can modify the document using the GitHub suggestions feature. The whole workshop was accessible through a web browser. No terminal or Git needed. Git is great, but it can have a huge learning curve. Cloning, branches, local, remote, origin, forking? What a forking problem. We already knew Git, GitHub, and branching, so we took care of it. From the master branch, we created our own branch. Contributors made their GitHub suggestions, and we mediated with the maintainers to merge these back into the master branch. Contributors get contributor recognition. The end result was NumPy documentation that was more accessible. Our target audience? Everyone. The whole range. Developers, designers, newcomers, even hardcore open source contributors who never made a NumPy contribution because they were rocking out in the Jupyter space. We did the workshops with Jupyter, NumPy, Scikit-learn, Dask, and even internally in our company blog. We are proud of our impact. It is a large-scale introduction to accessibility that allows people to immediately take action all in 1 hour. It reached new groups, especially first-time contributors. It has already made changes to the code base, and we're still doing this. We want to do more, perhaps with your project. Since we're near the end, here's a quick wrap-up. Accessibility benefits everyone, especially people with disabilities. You get a book, everybody gets a book. Designers are the mediators because of their skills and position. Actionable steps. Connect with other open source projects and learn together. Communicate across projects to stop reinventing the wheel and prevent burnout. Talk to disabled users. See what they need. Try all the platforms. Talk to developers. Just start asking. You'll see who else will join you on your quest and this fellowship. If you like what we did, click subscribe. Okay, not subscribe, but reach out to us. We can host a workshop with your project, or you can go rogue and host one yourself. Community organizing is such a valuable skill, and we want to help you with that. You can also see our workshop in action in the video here. As action-packed and informative this talk was, this is only the beginning, and there are so many other areas we could cover. But the beginning is exactly that, the first step. The first in removing many more barriers and creating a culture where people with disabilities feel welcomed and that they can contribute back. Thank you, Isabella and Tony, for starting this journey. Thank you, workshop partners, including Frank Kowalski, for inspiring us in the Jupyter workshops. And thank you, FOSDEM, for organizing all of this. If you want to reach me, you got options. Email, GitHub, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Maybe you'll be at my Radical After Party, which is my Q&A. Either way, peace out, everyone.
That was awesome, wasn't it?
Very well done. Very nice, Mars.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you hear that sound too?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Just let me.
I thought
It
someone was
also
asking a
sounds soft.
question already.
Yeah, but it was really soft, so I can't quite
Yeah.
hear it either.
Can you hear
Or
me?
you could, Yeah, or you can put it in the chat to your question.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yep.
That was, I just had to mute everything on my computer to avoid further extraneous sounds. Yes, so there are some other talks at FOSDEM, obviously. But we will come back to our Q&A with Mars. I didn't have a chance to look in the chat. I was worried that it will interfere with your viewing experience. I have a question for Mars. Mars, do different scientific Python projects have different alt text needs? And for example, how does alt text for NumPy differs from the JupyterLab alt text?
It's a very good question. And we have done these workshops in different communities. So we do notice similarities and differences. So I would say with like JupyterLab and then NumPy, one obvious difference is in the UI. So JupyterLab has like cells and buttons, things like that, whereas NumPy is in the command line. So you might assume NumPy doesn't really need alt text, but it has a lot of graphs and diagrams in the documentation. JupyterLab, like the alt text needs might be more about screenshots or release notes that tell people, hey, we moved the button here, or here is this, here's this in action. And alt text for like a screenshot where you describe user interface is a little different from a graph. We also had, like, we're also faced new problems that we didn't quite expect and we're still figuring out. So with matplotlib, one of the things that were mentioned was like auto-generated graphs, things that would be different over time. So you might write alt text for it at one point in time and it might change. And, you know, how do we write alt text for something that might change, or it might be like an interactive data visualization? That's something we're still figuring out. Or even in like the last NumPy community meeting, Ross brought up how NumPy documentation uses Sphinx, which is a version of RST. And we couldn't easily add alt text to an existing extension, Sphinx panels. So this is where we kind of are finding things out, a whole new world, because the general guidelines are usually for like HTML or maybe Markdown. And here we are trying to figure something out in RST or Sphinx. And this problem is like not unique to NumPy. There's like a lot of other scientific Python projects that also use Sphinx who are probably facing the same problem. So it actually, you know, these similarities and differences highlight how we have to work across projects in the community and share these solutions so that it can be more accessible as a whole.
There's a lot to learn about web accessibility. Corey has a question. Corey, please go ahead.
I was wondering, what is something that you learned working with the disability community that you did not know before working that you found surprising or unanticipated?
So to answer the question, I would say there's two parts. The first part is that I have to admit right now, we are not as involved with the disability community as much as we would like because of that chicken egg problem where disabled people may not be in our projects in the first place. So that is something we want to do in the future. But I would say something that has, I think, surprised me was how this idea of like conflicting accessibility needs. And I think because there's this idea like, oh, okay, we'll put this feature in and this feature in and this feature in so that everyone can have it be accessible. And that is a really good first step. But then there is like some like software and our communities are having another discussion of like, what if it seems like this accessibility need, what one person wants might be what another person doesn't like, or like having additional like, for example, with like graphs, we were seeing some examples of like providing colorblind option or providing an option that has like extra like non-color detail, such as having like, instead of a bar being like red, green, yellow, it's having one with stripes, one with dots, one with squares. But for some people, maybe that is too much information, and maybe that's not how they like cognitively want to process things. So that is, I think, what surprised me, but it makes a lot of sense. It's not something we've faced yet, but I think it's something that is really like food for thought and an inspiration when I look at other projects and communities. Thank you for that question.
That was a great question, Corey, and thank you for offering to reach out to the disabled tech community.
I have a follow-up question. Was it through social media, Twitter,
Through Slack.
through Slack? Is
Yeah,
it through
and
the?
I'm a power wheelchair user, and so I joined because I understand the chicken and egg problem of if disabled people are not visibly there, people don't understand the need for accessibility. So when I heard about the talk, I was like, I love Python and I love Matplotlib and NumPy, so I'm gonna show up.
That's awesome. You're exactly like the people we want to reach.